Okay, so this week's parasha is Parasha's Tisa, and I'd like to discuss with everybody the sin of the golden calf, and more specifically, I'd like to discuss Moshe's breaking of the tablets. Now, this is something I connect to because I spend a good deal of my life writing a Torah. I can't even imagine. Baruch Hashem, I hope to be finishing a Torah this Sunday, and this Torah, this week that I'm writing, this one that I'm writing, is in memory of Hillel Dinner. A Chayal gave his life. It's my great honor to write the Torah. I put my heart and soul into every Torah that I write. I can't even imagine writing a Torah and then destroying it. But as Moshe Rabbeinu did, he was, Lahavdil, I'm like not even an ant compared to Moses. And Moshe went up on Sinai, wrote the tablets with God. We'll see the text, and then he broke it because the children of Israel were committing a sin. So I'd like to look at some of the theories behind why he broke it, and to discuss that with everybody. So the first is let's look at the verses. It says in chapter 32, verse 15, Vayifen vayiren Moshe menahar. Moses turned and went down the mountain. Oh, I just also want to say that in the afternoons, if people want to come on, usually a half hour before Mincha, usually we do Chumash and Rashi, but starting today, God willing, for the next month, we're going to be doing the Haggadah. We're studying the Haggadah for Pesach. That'll be 5:20 until 5:50. And if people also want to know when the Rosh Chodesh year, which Shana Winters gives, it's in honor of our friend April, that will be March 18th. I'll send that out tomorrow, God willing. Okay, so Vayifen Vayiren Moshe Menahar, and that will also be on the Haggadah. So Moshe turned and went down the mountain. And the two tablets of testimony were in his hand. Luchot Ktuvim, the tablets were written Mishnei Evrahim on both sides. Mizel Mizehim Ktuvim. It was written miraculously. Rashi says it was an act of a miracle how they were written. V'aluchot Maisa Elokim Hima. The tablets were the work of God. Also, we should note that according to the Gemara and Baba Basra, the tablets were not shaped like oval, but they were square. Just so everyone knows that that's the traditional Jewish approach, that the tablets were square. So when you see the tablets written like an oval, well, that is not reflective of the Talmud's position. So the tablets were the work of God. And Rashi and the Avos to Rabbi Nassan tells us that this means that they were miraculously created from the 6 days of creation. V'amichtav, and the writing was michtav Elokimhu. It was the writing of God, charut al haluchot, engraved on the tablets. So it was engraved on the tablets. So Vayishma Yoshua et Koa'am, and Joshua heard the sound of people bireo, meaning to say that Rashi says this means that the people were rejoicing and laughing. Vayomer el Moshe, and he said to Moshe, Kol nochama b'machana. He said, the sound of the battle is in the camp. The sound of the battle is in the camp. Vayomer, and Moses responds, Ein kol anot gvura. This is not the sound of warriors who are shouting victory. Ve'ein kol anot chalusha, and it's not the sound of people who are being defeated in battle, who are shouting who are shouting, "Woe to us, we're being challenged." Kol anot anochi shomea. I hear the sound of affliction, something that's afflicting my soul. I hear an afflicting sound, meaning to say, the sound of idolatry. That's how the Gemara in Tanis, Jerusalem Talmud explains it. Moses, so Moses knows what's going on. He's well aware of what's going on. When he comes to the camp, he comes close to the camp. And he saw the calf that they were worshiping, and he saw the dancing, the celebration. Moshe got angry. And he threw from his hands the tablets. And he threw from his hands the tablets. And he broke them underneath the mountain. So let me just pause there for a second and just ask the basic question: Why did he break these tablets? Why did he break these tablets? I mean, he could not have been surprised. He knew what was going on. He already knew that they were worshiping the golden calf because God had said this to him. God said to him back in chapter 32, verse 7, Lech raid. God said to Moses, Lech raid, go quickly down the mountain. Because Kishichet Amcha, your people have been basically despicable. Your people are it's your fault. You're the one who brought them up. They quickly went away from the road that Asher Tzivitim, that you commanded them. They made an angel, a calf, a molten image. They bowed down to it. They slaughtered it. And they said, this is your God Israel, who took you out of Egypt. And so Moshe knows everything about it. And God didn't tell him to break the tablets. In fact, God sent him down with the tablets. So the question is, why did Moshe break the tablets? What's his purpose in doing so? Was it a good thing that he broke them? And okay, so let me just pause here and see if people have a comment about why they think he broke it. So one of the suggestions that was made, a very, very interesting suggestion, is that Moshe Rabbeinu, in breaking the tablets, was defying God. That God said, Hashem said, go down. And Moshe, when he sees the people, he doesn't want to give them those tablets anymore because he feels that they're not worthy of it, that they've sinned. And so Moses goes beyond what God said. But the challenge to that approach, aside from the fact that the traditional classical sources don't take that approach. They take a more nuanced approach. But the difficulty for that approach is not just that the classical commentaries don't take that, but that Moshe himself seems to be defending the Jewish people more than God. God wanted to destroy them. If you look back to chapter 32, verse 11, just a few verses earlier, Moshe entreated the face of God. He said, why should God be angry at your people? He says, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Don't destroy them. Don't wipe them out. And chapter 32, verse 14, that God changed his mind from what he had planned to do to these people. So the text seems to say that Moshe was the defense attorney of the Jewish people, and not that he wanted to give them a harsher punishment than God. So that's why it's challenging to give that answer that's being suggested, because it doesn't really fit with the text.
Was Moshe just defying God, or was he saying, what will the neighbors think?
Well, so that was one of his defenses when he speaks to God. That's one of his defenses. One of his defenses is that it will make a desecration of God's name, because the nations of the world won't recognize God's greatness if you do this. So that's a defense tactic that Moshe uses. But it would be strange to see Moshe pivot from that and then treating them more harshly than what God has said. So that's a challenge with that suggestion. But let me just share a few of the classic suggestions as to why Moshe broke the tablets. Okay, so the first let's start with the Rashi. There's two Rashis that I want to focus on here in our discussion here. The first is the Rashi right here. Actually, there's a few Rashis. Rashi says, "Vayashlech miyado," and he threw it out of his hands. Moses made for himself, not in anger, but he made a logical argument. He said, "Ma Pesach." Just like the Paschal Lamb, with 30 days before the holiday of Passover, we have to study the laws of Pesach. So right here, also, anybody's going to be anywhere near me for Pesach, we have, God willing, matzah coming in a little bit more than a week. So I have for everybody on the Zoom, or anybody contacts me, I have matzah for you as much as you want, God willing, as long as it arrives. When I was in Israel, I made sure to get some matzah, be participating with people who we bake matzah with, and we sent it. So hopefully it'll get here. It's matzah that I was a part of. So that way I'll be at your Seder. So Rashi says Moshe made an argument. He said, just like the Pesach, which is one of the mitzvos that the Torah says, which is just one of the mitzvos, and the Torah says, Kol ben nechar lo yochal bo, that anybody who is a foreigner cannot eat from it. And this is Rashi is actually quoting Gemara in Shabbos 87a. The entire Torah was being rejected here, and all of the Israelites were mumars. They were rejecting the whole Torah. How could it be that Moshe would give them the Torah? But that's a weak argument, because yes, the person who is an idolater, the person who's a mumar, does not partake in the Paschal Lamb, but he does partake in all the other mitzvot. And furthermore, we know that the Talmud says, Talmud has an expression that it says, if somebody eats garlic and their breath smells like garlic, should they then eat more garlic? That's what the Talmud says. Meaning to say, okay, this person has done something wrong. So the way we treat that is by denying them access to the Torah, which will thereby help them get better. That's a difficulty with that approach. So that's why that Rashi and that approach in the Talmud is challenging, at least to me. There's the classical approach of Rashi. There's another Rashi where Rashi states, if Rabbi Yosef is on here, he could pull it up, where Rashi, and it's based upon the Talmud. Hold on, I'm going to get you the exact source. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. I'll give you the exact source. Okay, let me just pull it back. Hold on 1 second. Okay, I don't know. I can't find the exact citation now, but it's along the same lines that Moshe viewed the Luchot and the Torah as like a bridal contract between God and the Jewish people. And so therefore, if the if the contract was in existence, then the Jews could be found guilty of committing adultery on God. So this was a legal argument, and Moshe was using legal arguments to protect the people. So according to this approach, Moshe broke the tablets, knowing he was doing something wrong, knowing that he was basically destroying his life's work, but he was doing it as a leader in order to protect his people. He was finding a legal way of supporting them, and that is they can't be held responsible because they, technically speaking, never took possession of the tablets. They never took possession of the Torah. So how could they be held responsible? That's like a legalistic argument, a legalistic maneuver, and we could poke fun at it, but procedure is important in law. If you don't have the proper procedure, case gets dismissed. And so that was Moshe's argument. A second approach is that this is from the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, chapter 45, that also an ancient source, that as Moshe was coming down the mountain, the tablets got too heavy for him. And what happened was the letters started to fade away. They started to fade away, and he became tashash kocho. He became weak, and the letters faded. And as the letters faded, he was unable to hold it. He was unable to hold it anymore. And when he was unable to hold it, it just broke on its own. It just broke on its own. It was just too weak for him. So that's the idea. That's the idea, that not that Moshe broke it, but that it broke on its own. Vayashlech miyadav doesn't mean, according to this approach, that Moshe himself threw it down, but rather it means that it was thrown down on his own. The Rabbi Soloveitchik has a discussion of this, and Rabbi Soloveitchik says, no, this doesn't really. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, well, we have to understand what this means, because when Moshe was coming down the mountain, it was too heavy. He couldn't hold it. It was too heavy. But then later on in chapter 34, it says, God says to Moshe, that you should engrave for yourself new tablets, just like the first ones. And I'll write on these tablets the words that were on the first ones that you broke. And then you'll go up the mountain with them. But if they're too heavy, how was Moshe able to go up the mountain with the tablets that we just said those tablets were too heavy for him, and he dropped them? So Rabbi Soloveitchik explains what's intuitive, what we could all understand is that when he was going down the mountain and Moshe saw that the people were sinning, he saw what's the purpose of these tablets now? He has tablets for people who are sinning. It wasn't just that. Also, I heard a share from Rabbi Fran. He says it wasn't just that they were worshiping the golden calf. They were doing it with joy, with micholot. They saw the calf and dancing. These were people who were celebrating their sin. They were proud of their sin. And at that point, Moshe Rabbeinu is holding these tablets, and he sees that the people are completely not connected to his way of life. They don't want any interest they have no interest in the Torah. They have no interest in studying Torah and following the way of Torah. And he was just in like disgust. And the letters are fading, meaning, what does that mean? It means the letters are useless. The letters have no purpose. The people have no interest in them. What's a Torah for just Moses? Moses already knew the whole Torah. So at that moment, the Torah just became an unbearable burden. He was directionless, purposeless. He had no flock to communicate with. And Moshe at that moment The Torah was just a heavy burden, and it broke. But after God tells him in chapter 34 that the people were forgiven, God allowed Moshe to see his back. And Moshe understood that that the people were being forgiven, that he was going to have a chance. God says to him, engrave for yourself the new luchos, and then you're going to go up the mountain and you're going to go down and you're going to give it to the people and you're going to teach them. We're going to need to redo the tablets. Now Moshe had a direction. Now he had a purpose. He realizes that the people are going to be his students, that he is going to connect to them, and he does have a purpose in life. Then no burden is too heavy. Then he understands that this is not a burden, that this is his mission in life. And at that point, he's able to lift it. So this is like what somebody told me when I first became a rabbi. Somebody said to me, find yourself something you love to do and you'll never have to work a day in your life. So anybody ever hear that expression? And I feel that way. I feel that way. I definitely feel that I'm living my life that way, that I never had to work a day in my life, because you find something you love to do, you'll never have to work a day in your life. So that's the second approach. The first approach is Moshe was trying to protect the people on legal grounds by dismissing it for procedural purposes. The second is that Moshe was overcome with basically with the fading letters. He felt no purpose, and they just broke. They broke once he realized the reality of what his life was about. I see some people are waiting to ask some questions, so let me just pause for a moment before we do a couple more approaches. A third approach, actually, is some people have been raising. What did God think of Moshe's reaction? The third approach, we're going to look at that what did God think of Moshe's reaction? So the chapter 34, verse 1, it says, God said to Moshe, Psoacha, you should engrave Shnei Luchot Avanim, 2 tablets of stones, Karishonim, just like the first ones, V'chasavti aluchos, and I will write on the tablets, Et hadvarim asher ayu aluchot harishonim asher shibarta. Those words that were on the first tablets that you broke, asher shibarta, that you broke. And about these words, asher shibarta, that you broke, Rashi says, well, Rashi here doesn't quote it, but he quotes it elsewhere. He quotes the Gemara from 87a in Shabbos, from Tractate Shabbos. And what is Rashi here does say it, but hold on, I don't know why I don't see it here. Okay. I don't have my Art Scroll edition of Rashi with me, so the edition I have is a little bit funky to find. Here, I'll read the whole Rashi in a moment. But let me read the Rashi. Rashi says, Pesocha, engrave for yourself. Atashi barta rishonus. You broke the first ones. Ata pasalcha acharos. You engraved the second ones. It's a parable of a king that went overseas and he left behind, and this is the Rashi I cited before, he left behind his betrothed with her maidens. And because the maidens were sinning, so some bad news went up, bad rumors went up about her. So Amad Shushvina v'karak suvasa. So her best friend or whatever, somebody who was watching out for her, stood up and tore up the ksuva. That's like the breaking of the tablets. He said, if the king will come and want to kill her, he'll say, listen, she's not your wife yet. The king inspected it, and then he discovered that there was actually nothing, that she didn't actually sin. It was the maid who sinned. And then he made up with her. So the Shushvina said, write her a new ketubah because the first one was torn. And the king said, you tore it up. You go out and buy the paper, buy new paper, and I'll write it in my handwriting. God is the king, the maids are the Erev Rav, and the Shushvina is Moshe. And the betrothed the betrothed of God is the Jewish people. According to Rashi, this is the approach that I hinted to earlier, but I didn't say the full Rashi. Rashi's saying the Jewish people never sinned. Everybody was just all angry and worked up. So Moshe broke up the luchos because he says until God calms down, he's going, and then realizes that it wasn't the Jewish people who sinned, it was the Erev Rav, and they weren't really part of it. That goes back to the old approach. That the first of the approaches, that it was a legal argument. But then we saw the spiritual, but now we have a third approach, and that is that God approves. This is what the Gemara in Shabbos 87a says. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe. God says to Moses, Asher shibarta, you broke the tablets. Yasher kochachai, shkoyach, shekoyach, shibarta. Great job that you broke it. God agreed with this idea. God agreed with the idea that Moses broke. God agreed with the fact that Moshe broke the tablet. Now, what is the message here? What is the message here? So, I was thinking it's like this. I was thinking there's a couple of ways we could understand it. Let me just say my first one, and then I'll say another one, which comes from a Gemara we're going to get to, God willing, in 40 days in the Daf Yomi. God approves of Moshe breaking it. Maybe in essence, Moshe was saying, enough with the worship of things, of objects, because valuing the tablets is just a cousin to valuing a golden calf. Meaning in both cases, we're saying, let's give honor and respect to a physical object. And maybe that's what Moshe Rabbeinu was in effect saying. That it's not about things and objects, it's about accepting the law of the Torah. Maybe that's what's going on. So that's one way to understand God's approval. Another way to understand God's approval of Moshe breaking it is from the Gemara Menachos 99b. Actually, today we did 52, and God willing, we'll get to 99. Can't count that high, but we'll get to 99 soon enough. Actually, maybe it's going to be on right after Pesach. So, actually, no, it'll be maybe well after Pesach. So it says, Asher Shibarta, Amar Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says, Pa'amim shebitula shel Torah, zehu yisoda. Sometimes the breaking of the Torah is actually its strengthening. Because it says, Asher Shibarta, Mulamich Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe Yasher Kochacha Shibarta. Good job that you broke it. Meaning to say, sometimes in order to really strengthen the Torah, you need to break it. You need to say, the path I'm going on, the path we're going on is not the correct path. And you have to tear it down and rebuild. And just to continue on the same path without making any real adjustments would have been a tremendous mistake. That's basically the idea here. The idea here is that there needed to be a break. They needed to learn what they had done. They needed to understand the significance of their mistake. And that's why God has approval of Moshe doing this. And so that's the third approach of what we're saying now. The first approach was legal, the legal argument. The second approach was Moshe felt himself defeated. And the third approach is God approves what Moshe did. And what proves what Moshe did is because either it was necessary in order for the people to recognize, or else because of the idea that Moshe was teaching them the lesson that it's not about the possessions, it's about Hashem, and not about the physical objects, which is clearly a lesson needed after the golden calf. Now I want
Um,
to take to yes,
Rabbi,
yeah,
an,
sure. Hold on, let me
an,
just pause it.
another.
One more approach, a fourth main approach, is based upon the Gemara and Baba Basra, Yudalad Amabez 14b, where the Gemara tells us, Luchos v'shivre luchos munachim ba'aron, that the tablets and the broken tablets are both in the ark. They're both in the ark. So this doesn't tell us, we're no longer really saying why he broke them, but you could actually read it that way. That the whole drama of the story is to teach a lesson. And what's the lesson? The broken tablets, the Talmud tells us, even after Moshe wrote a second set of tablets, the first tablets which were broken remained in the ark. They were also placed in the ark. They retained their holiness. And this passage, that the broken tablets are still holy, it's possible to read the story this way, that Moshe was teaching them the lesson that even though, because who's broken now? The Bnei Israel are the broken tablets. The children of Israel are the broken tablets. They've just done the worst sin in Jewish history, which is the worshiping of the golden calf right after Har Sinai. While their leader is talking to God, they go worship the golden calf. And you might think that they might think that they're useless, worthless, unredeemable. So about them, Moshe comes along and says, no, you're broken, but you're still holy. You are the tablets. And so therefore, that's what Moshe was telling them, that they are the broken tablets and they will still retain their holiness. So that's a fourth approach. Let me just summarize these four approaches to the broken tablets. Either, as we saw, that it was the legal approach of Moshe Rabbeinu saying they didn't actually sin, you can't hold them responsible, that he broke the ketubah, so to speak. So to administrative grounds, he got the case dismissed. Or else, number two was the spiritual, that Moshe Rabbeinu just was at that point bereft. He had no sense of purpose, and they broke. For that reason. And then there's a third approach that God actually approved it, either because God actually approved it, either because of the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching them the lesson about Torah, not possessions, or else sometimes you need to break the Torah in order to fix it. Then there's the fourth approach, which is that even though it was broken, it was holy, and also Bnei Israel were holy. And of course, in Mikra Yotzei Midei Pshuto, the text does not leave it literal, and there are those who say amongst our group that either Moshe was defying God, he did not act properly, or he acted out of anger. Of course, those approaches are there. I was just sharing some of the classical approaches from the Talmud. So I'll stop here and take any questions that people might have.